This is Geometry 4.2, working on rigid motion and congruence for the second day. What we need to recognize here is we're going to talk about congruence and we're going to talk about equals. When we have the congruent symbol, we are looking for letters. When we have an equal symbol, we need a number. Very important for you to identify that. LX. We don't even need to look at the picture. Use the congruent statement. Segment LX, that's the middle and last letter. That's going to be congruent to the middle and last letter. So that would be IW. Segment IW. Here we're congruent. Angle A is congruent. Angle A is your first letter, so it's going to go with the first letter. It's going to be angle G. Letter C has an equal sign. They're looking for a number. So we'll come back to do that one next. D is triangle LAX, is congruent. So we've got to name the triangle in the correct order. So you've got to use a triangle symbol. LAX was the middle, the first, and last. So we have to use the middle, the first, and the last. The IGW. Angle I has a congruent symbol here. So we're looking for I as the middle letter. We're going to use L as the middle letter. So now for IW. We see that IW is the last two letters. LX are the last two letters. So IW has to go with LX. So IW is going to also be 4 centimeters. So we would say 4 centimeters. If it's an equal sign, you should have numbers. If it's a congruent symbol, you should have letters. The measure of angle A. It's equal. We're looking for a number. Angle A is here. Doesn't have a value. I can't even calculate it because I don't know what the other two angles are. I know what one of them is, but I don't have both the other angles. So A is supposed to go with G. G is 55 degrees. So that means A is going to be 55 degrees. L, to calculate L, we need to take the 180 degrees, 92 plus 55 plus the measure of angle L. Here we have 147. We minus our 147. And we get 33. Remember that congruent symbols are letters and equal signs are numbers. Here we have congruent statements. We're only looking for a single congruent statement for each pair of triangles. So pause the video, try to write out your congruent statement that would appropriately match. Then I'll come through and I'll write out at least one also. So to name a congruent statement, we're going to pick one of the triangles. We'll name this first triangle, and there are 6 correct ways that you can name it. I'm going to start with the corner or the vertice that has one tick mark. So I'm going to say triangle N. Then I'm going to go to do the 2 tick marks, which is L. Then I'll move over to the 3 tick marks, which is K. You've got to have a triangle symbol. And then you can name your triangle. There are 6 correct ways you can name it. I'm suggesting to name it in the order of the tick marks, so that when you try to compare it and you come over here for triangle, this is congruent to triangle. Since I did 1 tick mark, 2 tick mark, 3 tick mark, I know I'm going to follow that same pattern. 1 tick mark starts with L, 2 tick mark starts with N, and 3 tick mark starts with M. So this would be a possible congruent statement. There are 5 other correct congruent statements, but every time your N has to be in the same position as your L has to be in the same position as the N, the K has to be in the same position as the M. However you label it. This second example. As of today, the way that we prove triangles congruent, we need to show that 3 sides of one triangle are congruent to their corresponding sides of another triangle. Well, we don't have that. We only have 2 sides that we know compared to 2 sides of another triangle that we know. We don't have the third. And with the angles, same for the angles, 3 angles of one triangle are congruent to the corresponding angles of a second triangle. I only know 1 angle that matches in the other triangle. I don't have a relationship between the other angles. So this one, as of today, because in the future we're going to learn shorter ways to prove triangles congruent. We don't need to know all 6 pieces, but as of today, that's the only way we can do it. So as of today, not enough information. All right, moving over here to our last one. Notice that we have 1 tick mark for an angle, 1 tick mark for an angle, 2 tick marks for an angle, 2 tick marks for an angle. But I don't have the third set of tick marks. Because we have vertical angles, we know that the third pair of angles have to be congruent also. So now we have the angles that match, and we have a pair of sides that match for each of the triangles. Now notice this also, that between the 1 tick mark and the 2 tick mark angles is the same corresponding side. Between the 2 tick mark and the 3 tick mark, we have a side of 3 tick marks. So here we have a 3 tick mark and a 2 tick mark angle with the side of 3 tick marks. So they are constructed in the same order. So triangle, again, I would go with 1, 2, and 3. So that's going to be DGE is congruent to triangle. 1 tick mark, 2 tick marks, 3 tick marks. HFE. Now we're going to use the congruence that we know to solve for missing parts. Here we have a 4-sided figure. So notice what a congruent statement looks like for a 4-sided figure. It does not have a symbol in front. It's definitely not a triangle, so we're not going to use a triangle. Understand why we use triangles. We use a triangle when we're naming the congruent statement because we don't want to be confused with it being an angle, because an angle is also named with 3 letters. 4 letters can name a polygon of 4 sides. So we notice that we're supposed to solve for x. I see that x is here on angle G. I see that angle G is congruent to angle T. Angle G is congruent to angle T. I notice that from the congruent statement. G is 2x minus 7. And that's going to equal my 103. So I substitute in the values I know. Then I can add my 7. And I can divide by 2. And I get 55. Then it asks us to find the measure of G. Well, I'm pretty sure I know what G equals. It's going to equal whatever T does, and G is going to be 103. But let's be sure my answer made sense. So if the measure of angle G is 2x minus 7, I should be able to plug in my 55 and calculate that I get my 103. And yes, angle G is 103. Coming down to the final question. Find the value of each variable. We're looking for the variable y here. What's the calculation of y? Well, if this is 65, this is 1 tick mark, that makes this 65. I know that the acute angles of a right triangle are complementary. So the measure of angle D plus the measure of angle E has to be 90 degrees. So D is 65. E is going to be the variable y. And I know that the acute angles are going to be complementary. They're going to add to 90. So I can simply subtract my 65 and get 25. In this one, my 1 tick mark is 45. So my 1 tick mark should be 45. My 3 angles of a triangle. We can't just use 2 because we don't have a right angle. We don't have complementary angles in this picture. So here I have to talk about how the measurement of angle M plus the measurement of angle K plus the measurement of angle O adds up to 180. Because a triangle always adds up to 180. It's called the triangle sum theorem. M was my variable y, K is 45, and O is 65. So we would collect like terms, which is 110, and subtract your 110. I get 70. Then for my last one, I have to look at what I know. I know that the 2 tick marks is 2y plus 2. The 1 tick mark up here is 120. And the 3 tick mark is 20. So if I know the 3 tick mark is 20, I know the 3 angles add up to 180. So I know the 2y plus 2 and the 120 and the 20 have to add up to 180. These are the equations you should be writing down as you do your calculations. You should not just put down 70 or just put down your final answer. 2y plus 142 equals 180. subtract your 142. That gives me 38. And then to get y by itself, we're going to divide by 2. And y is 19. We solved for each of the variables.